Joining us now, Congressman Randy Forbes, 2nd District candidate. He is our 4th District Congressman, and he is running in the 2nd District, and he is in a primary battle. There are 3 candidates, Randy Forbes, Scott Taylor, House of Delegates member Virginia Beach, and Virginia Beach attorney Pat Cardwell. That'll be decided in a June 14th primary in the 2nd District, which is open to all registered voters. So you want to circle that if you're in the 2nd District on your calendar. Be sure and participate in that primary. And joining us now, he's on the Armed Services Committee, and our good friend, Congressman Randy Forbes. Good to have you back on, sir.
John, thank you. It's good to be with you.
And let's start by giving you and your family our prayers and condolences. I know that your mom passed last week, and I know how close you all were. And so I'm sorry for your loss, sir.
Well, John, thank you. You know, there are things that you know are going to eventually come, but they always still take you back. We were very blessed. I had a wonderful mother and father, and, you know, in today's world, that's just a huge blessing, and we were blessed to have her for 91 years.
Well, she did live a fabulous life, and she had a great family. Hey, she's up in a good place now, so I understand you had to take some time off, so we're glad now you're back in the saddle. I want to get to this opportunity, I guess you would call it, in trying to give the American people the truth about what happened to our sailors when they were captured and actually taken hostage by Iran. You were sharing all over the news that you had seen some of the evidence that the American people haven't seen, and that you were really upset by what actually went down. Can you share that with our audience, sir?
John, I can. And remember, it's not just what the Iranians did. What they did was against international law and maritime law. But it was also how we responded, or more particularly, how we didn't respond. And unfortunately, that's all classified information, but I'll tell you this, when you hear all of those details, you're going to be appalled, not just with what the Iranians did. We kind of expect them to do bad things, but then I guess our lack of response and preparation and all of that will eventually come out. The big part of all of this, John, you know, it was on a backdrop. This all happened when the president was given the State of the Union. Didn't even mention the fact that, you know, 10 of our sailors had been captured, and he was trying to push for the Iranian deal, which is a horrible deal. But, John, put this on the backdrop of the fact that the Russians are buzzing our ships. The Chinese are telling us we can't even pull into a port call in Hong Kong. The Iranians in December, right before they captured our sailors, did live missile fires within 1,500 yards of the Truman. And in addition to that, they buzzed our ship. We not only didn't do anything, but Secretary Kerry actually comes out and thanks them for how they handled things and for releasing our sailors. And so what we did is to say, if the administration is not going to say anything, at least Congress can do it. So we put in a resolution where Congress says, what you're doing is wrong, it's dangerous, and it needs to stop.
So when are the American people going to be made aware of the details of what happened? Obviously, you've got classified briefings that you can't share with us legally, but we do have a right to know what actually went down there. When is this going to become
John,
public?
We're putting pressure on them. We think that will be forthcoming within a few months, perhaps. But again, that's out of our control, and that's in the administration's control as to when they declassify that information.
Now, after receiving it, and I know you were upset by a lot of the things that you saw, Congressman, were you able to have a conversation with anybody involved in this, in the Department of Defense or the State Department or something else, and just take them to task on what exactly is happening here?
Well, yes. And again, I can't go into all those details, John, simply because, I think a lot of people in the Navy are very upset, too. Again, I want to emphasize it's not just what Iran did. It's the situation and how we responded and the circumstances there. You probably know they've already transferred one officer because of some of this, and I think that's what's going to be also very, very concerning when people see that and kind of the condition that put us into this situation and how we responded from it.
Now, Congressman Forbes, what about the fact that we can't dock on as it relates to the South China Sea? We've had docks that we've used forever, and now we're basically scampered out of there. And this is not really in the news. The president's not reacted to this. This is unprecedented action by the Chinese Navy, is it not?
Well, John, they've done it before, but under previous administrations, and we have reacted to it. And let me just tell you a couple of things. What's happening now is that all across the globe, the administration has had the philosophy that they'll just bow down to bullies or try to ignore bullies and thinking they can buy them off and they'll just go away. There's never been a situation in history ever where that's happened. Bullies just bully more. And so what happens is each of these countries, when they do these kinds of things, they get bolder and bolder and more aggressive. So in the situation we were just talking about with Iran, then the president ends up giving them $100 billion roughly, and then, what did Iran do? Iran's now demanding that we get out of the entire Arabian Gulf or they're going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. If you look at China, each time they push us, and they're getting more and more aggressive in China, which creates more possibility of conflict. When they tell us we can't go into a port call in Hong Kong, remember, we've got families that take their own money and fly over and expend money so they can see their loved ones and members of their family when they pull into these port calls. And for the Chinese just to come up and say, nope, can't do it, to try to send a message to us, what we have historically then done is to say, okay, here's what we're going to do then. You don't want us coming in Hong Kong? We're going to sail through the Strait of Taiwan. Or we're going to, start going to a port call somewhere else. They could go to the Philippines. They could go to Japan. They could go to Taiwan, but that starts sending them a message that if you do these kind of actions, there's going to be some sort of reaction to it so that you stop doing some of this.
And yet we do nothing.
Do nothing. And even worse in the Iranian situation, John, and you and I, it just gets our blood pressure up, but it's just accurate and true for the American people to have their blood pressure up. We write them a check for $100 billion, 10 times their military budget for a single year, and that's the reward we give them. And then Secretary Kerry is thanking them for what they did.
It's unbelievable. Congressman Forbes, let's get to your visa security bill that you introduced last week. Can you elaborate on that for our listeners?
Sure can, John. Basically, we know the immigration system and the problems that we've got with it across the country, but most Americans think it's only people driving across our borders or coming in here illegally through the borders. That's a big part of it. But the other thing is they fail to realize that last year alone we had 10 million people that we granted visas to from all over the world, and we've got a huge problem with how we vet those visas. So what this bill does is to say it's going to start putting some layers of protection for Americans in there. And here's what it does. It says if you're from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, or any other country in addition to that the Secretary of State determines is a high-risk country, we're going to do an extra layering on these visas. And here's what they are. It's just some common sense stuff, John, that you and I would have done. But it says this: if you don't fill out the application completely, it's going to be denied. We've had people coming in here where the applications weren't even completed and they just rubber stamped them and send them in. That's just wrong. Secondly, we're making them sign them in person under oath. Third thing is we're raising the burden of proof so that we do what's called a security advisory opinion, where we're actually looking at databases to see if they've committed any other or had any other problems somewhere else, and looking at social media so we can determine if they're making any accusations that could be dangerous to Americans. And we're saying in the bottom of that, if that the evidence now is going to have to be clear and convincing. In other words, we're going to err on the side of protecting Americans instead of allowing people to come in. In addition to that, we make sure that we have English translations of everything that's in there, and we're making Homeland Security actually be there to process these visas, and then to come up with advanced analytical software so we can determine where we think fraud is. We think this is going to have a huge impact on vetting some of these visas that we think have been way too lax in the past.
Why do we have all these visas?
Well, some of the visas have good reasons. I mean, some of the visas you have because you have people coming in for tourism, you have people coming in for educational reasons. The problem is you don't get to vet all of those. So what we can do is vet the individuals. Let me just give you another one that comes in. If you allow somebody to come in for a family visit because there's a biological connection. Before, they could just say anything they wanted. We're making them have a DNA test in this where we know they actually have that biological connection, that's there. So John, this is at least a step forward in saying we're going to make sure the visa application process means something, and we're doing the best we can to vet these individuals before they actually come into our borders.
Well, that makes sense. That's common sense legislation, no question about it. Congressman Forbes, let's get to the National Defense Authorization Act going through markup now. Big difference between the NDAA in the Senate and the House. Huge dollar difference. How do you see it being reconciled?
I think we'll win, and I'm pretty confident we will. And, we're doing everything we can to prevail. We will be on the floor today with our bill, and it'll be an $18 billion difference between our bill and the Senate bill. We think this is vital to the Navy, as I've talked to you about. This is a down payment on a 350-ship Navy. We had some stuff that bothered us, quite honestly, and when we found out that some of the information that is presented to us in hearings, John, is actually filtered. So in other words, the State Department, the Office of Management and Budget actually reviews the information that was given to us. We need to have accurate, clear information. And so, that's why we're having this big hearing down here next Monday, where we're going to have Democrats and Republicans. It's one of the first times they actually are going to get to hear the captains of these ships telling us the conditions they're in, what these deployments mean. But this is huge because the National Defense Bill is up this week. Then we have to have all this information. So when we go to the Senate, we can actually prevail and get those dollars up to where we need to get our men and women the resources they need to win these fights, but then after they win them, to come back home safely.
When you've talked to Senate leadership, what is their vision? Why this big difference? I mean, $18 billion is a hefty sum of money. What is their vision of being $18 billion less?
I think they're going to ultimately agree with us, John. I think it comes down to what the president put in his budget. He cut that figure down. I think he made a huge mistake in doing that. But as you know, this president's been consistently doing that. I mean, just to give you a snapshot, John, that a lot of people don't realize right now, but when the president came into office, our Navy was able to meet about 90% of our combatant commanders' needs around the globe. This year, they'll meet about 43%. And what's happened to that is our deployments have gone up 32%. We now have 3 out of 5 carriers that we need. 1 of 4 of our Navy strike fighters are ready for combat. Our fleet has shrunk by 40% to 272 ships, and our older strike fighters, which is half of the Navy's aircraft, John, only 1 and 2 of those is grounded due to a shortage of parts and maintenance. We've just got to turn this around, and so I'm glad to have this debate. I'm confident we're going to win this debate. We just need the data to do it, and we're going to get that data, and we're going to win on the House floor today and tomorrow, and I think we're going to win in the Senate.
Okay, I've got about a minute and a half. Final question. Let's go to NATO. The Turkish government is lobbying for the country of Cyprus, to come into NATO. You look at it, can't really figure out what the strategic alliance would be with NATO or the United States. How do you stand on that?
Well, John, my big concern with countries that are coming into NATO has always been not just which countries we let in, but what they bring to the table. And, having a lot of countries in doesn't really matter a lot unless they're bringing assets to the table. And one of the things that NATO has suffered from over the last several years is having many of these countries that haven't been wanting to step up to the plate and provide their share of the defense of the world. So we've got to look for allies wherever we can. NATO is one place, but we've got to get them with Japan. We've got to get them with Australia, with the Philippines, and, all over the globe. But again, I'm not as concerned as who we let in, who we don't. I want everybody we can have to be our ally. I just want to make sure they're bringing something to the table in terms of resources so we don't have to carry it all on our backs.
So what do you say to the countries that are now paying their fair share? I mean, right now we find out that over 80% of NATO was funded by the United States, and we've got major countries not paying their fair share. It's kind of like what you said about China and Iran. We don't do anything about it.
Well, I think, John, there's 2 things we have to do. One, the first thing we have to do is not cut off our nose to spite our face. And we've got to remember that one of the reasons we have allies and we do these things is not just to protect our allies, it's to protect and defend the United States of America. And we also need some of these access to some of these facilities. We need all the support we can get. So we can't just say, okay, we're going to walk away, we don't want your help anymore. But I think what we have to do is continue to have a clear message, continue to push them, whether it's on trade or whatever else we do, to say, okay, you've got to come up to the plate militarily and do your fair share too. If we do that, I think these countries begin to respond. You look at Japan and what they're doing now and changing even their constitution so that they can step up to the plate and do more. And they all recognize, that we're in a very, very dangerous world now. They can't go it alone, so they've got to come up to the plate, I think, and begin to carry more of that share, because we're not going to be able to carry it all on our backs down the road.
All right, we are out of time. We want to thank Congressman Randy Forbes for being with us. More information, you can go to randyforbes.co. That's randyforbes.co. And the Republican primary for the congressman, for the Republican nomination for the 2nd District is June 14th. Mark it down on your calendar. It's always an honor to have you on, sir. Thank you
John,
so much.
Thanks so much, and you have a wonderful day.
All right.